Hello and welcome to Attack of the Famiclones. In this part 2 of my look at the Super Retro Trio, I'm going to be talking about the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive portion of this Super Retro Trio. So if you haven't watched part 1 yet, which was the overview, click the annotation right here to go check out that video. That video talks about what the system is and what it comes with, so make sure you check that one out first. Okay, so moving on, the Sega Genesis. The Sega Genesis and Mega Drive was one of the most important consoles of the 16-bit generation of the early 90s. In Japan, the Mega Drive was somewhat popular, but in Europe and North America, especially with its sports game scenes, the Mega Drive and Genesis was neck and neck with the Super Nintendo. And which one is better, the Genesis or the Super Nintendo? The Mega Drive or the Super Nintendo? This was, the big thing when you were a kid. Back in my childhood, I remember having so many fantastic games for the Sega Genesis, and so many games came out for the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo, so I was never really picky on which one I liked more, or which one Genesis sucks or Super Nintendo sucks. It was like, both of them had excellent games, so the whole thing about, one versus the other was kind of pointless to me. What's really cool about the Super Retro Trio is, even going back to that age-old debate on which one is better, Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis, either way, you have choices here which are fantastic. You can either use a 3-button or a 6-button Sega Genesis controller, as shown here, to play your Sega Genesis or Mega Drive games on the Super Retro Trio, or you can use the very Super Nintendo-looking controllers that come with the system, as these are actually Sega Genesis controllers. They just look like Super Nintendo controllers. And the way it maps is that you have the D-pad as, your D-pad. Then you have, on the Genesis, you have your A, B, C, X, Y, and Z buttons. And on this controller, you have the A, B, C, X, Y, and Z buttons. And then you have your start and your mode button. The mode button is the shoulder button on the 6-button Genesis controller. So you can use either one of these controllers. It doesn't matter. Either the ones that come with them, or you can use your original Sega Genesis or third-party, retro controllers. Compatibility with the Super Retro Trio, as opposed on the Genesis portion, is very, very strong. In fact, it works with every Genesis and Mega Drive game ever made. And the reason for this is because it has actually a region switch built right into it that allows you to choose between whatever region that you want. You can play North American games, you can play your European games, you can play Japanese Mega Drive games, or you can play Asian Mega Drive games. So it doesn't matter what region it is, you can play anything. So the other thing I should mention is the cartridge slot is big enough to accommodate even the big, bulky Japanese Mega Drive game, which are physically bigger than the North American and European Sega Genesis and Mega Drive games that were released in those regions. So with all this said, this system is poised to play whatever you throw at it. So let's get into stress testing. So the first game I got for you is, of course, Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog was your early killer app for the Sega Genesis. This was not actually a launch title by any means. It came out actually several years after the Genesis and Mega Drive was originally conceived, but this was the game that really sold systems. So let's play some of this. Plop it in, hit the light, hit the power switch, and here we go. Now this is capturing through S-Video, and we're going to play some of this. Now, as you probably can tell from right away as soon as you look at it, the S-Video signal is very bright and vibrant. However, it does produce these vertical bars that I guess would not be as noticeable on a CRT as they are in an HD TV, as I'm using this for demonstration purposes, simply because a CRT has, reflecting rolling screen issues where if I try and capture footage off of it, As far as I can tell, this is absolutely perfect to the original Genesis hardware. A lot of Genesis clones have bad audio or, you know, inaccurate colors or something like that. But just like the Retro Gen adapter by Retrobit, which came before this, this is just perfect. Retrobit really does know how to make a really good Genesis clone. Alright, moving on, let's plug in a different game. Now, I should mention that when you're removing a game, it's actually, you need to apply a bit of force here. The cartridge slot is a little bit tight on the carts, where it does have a slight bit of death grip. So, but it's not super bad. There are definitely worse clones than this for death grips. So, let's plug in one of my favorite games. There's a classic sound. Rocket Knight Adventures is one of the very best games for the Sega Genesis. If you've never played this game, you really are missing out because, man, this game is good. Right into it. Now for this video I'm using the Super Retro controllers that comes with the Super Nintendo-like controllers. And playing Genesis games with a Super Nintendo controller just feels, I don't know, it kind of feels right in a way that just feels wrong, if that makes any sense. Especially the 3-button controller. The Super Nintendo controller makes very good use with, you know, using the Y, B, and A buttons on the Super Nintendo controller. Slow down, but that happens on the real hardware too. This was a game with a lot of parallax scrolling, and it pushed the system in some ways. Every time I play this, I just can't help but play it, you know? Alright, moving on, let's plug in something else. See how this handles reproduction games. So this is one of my very, very favorite games of all time. And I've talked about this before, too. Moving on from Konami, we have a Capcom classic. So this is a repro cart of Mega Man The Wily Wars, which was only available in North America for the Sega channel. This game was never actually made on physical cartridge. For that, only Europe and Japan got them as the horrible 50 Hz PAL version or the region-locked and Japanese Rock Band Mega World. So this is a compilation of Mega Man 1, 2, and 3, plus Wily Tower, so let's plug in, I don't know, let's do Mega Man 2, sure. as you can hear, there's no distortion in the audio whatsoever. So this is something that occurs on other Genesis clones that I've noticed, such as the Genesis side of the Hyperkin Retron 3. Mega Man 2. Let's do Woodman. That distortion that just happened occurs because the screen rapidly flashes when that happens. And I guess that, you know, it does happen on a CRT, or HDTV, the same as it would on a CRT. It's just a little quirk of this game, so yeah, I don't really think that really says anything about the system itself, as it's nothing I noticed or observed in any other game. Of course, as these were originally NES games, they control just fantastically with a Super Nintendo-like controller. Next, let's throw in another example of excellent audio on the Sega Genesis. With one of the very best games of all time across any platform. Game with a soundtrack so incredible that it actually has the sound composer as a copyright thing right on its title screen. This is Yuzo Koshiro's Streets of Rage 2, otherwise known as Bare Knuckle 2. Let's choose Blaze, let's play some Blaze. Let's go for it. I just love doing that over and over. Moving on, let's try a PAL game. So for this, here is a game that I have to actually move the read and switch, so I'm just going to do that right now, and hit the power button. Let's play a PAL exclusive. course, this is the famous Zero Wing. Famous because of that intro. Otherwise, it's just a fairly average shooter for the Sega Genesis. A system that was, quite frankly, known for these type of games. So as you can tell, the system plays these MegaDrive games completely fine. Even though this is a PAL game, it runs completely fine on my NTSC TV and my NTSC system. Next, let's move on and show a different game. So now we're going to try a Japanese MegaDrive game. Again, switch the region switch to Japan, hit the power button, and here we go. So here is another one of my favorite games. A game that doesn't get the praise it really does deserve. It doesn't really get remembered that well either. This is Mugen Senshi Valis, or Phantasm Soldier Valis. Valis is this girl, Yoko, who gets the Sword of Valis, and she has to then go defend the world or something. It's a 16-bit platformer, but instead of playing as your typical male hero, you play as a schoolgirl. Yay! With a sword! But don't worry, it's not degrading at all. Eventually, in stage 2, she gets to wear a, battle bikini. Hooray! The enemies can't stop her. She has blue hair, and she's wearing a Sailor Fuku. The Valis series would be mostly known for, its absurd voice acting for these TurboGrafx CD releases. It's too bad. I miss Riot Soft. I wish they'd make more. Valis could be a game that I think would be a good modern HD remake of this game. It would be really cool, I think. The subway. I love the music. And all the posters for Riot Software. Shameless self-promotion for the win. Alright, next, let's try a game combination that does not work on Retrobit's previous efforts, which were the Retro Gen adapter for the Super Nintendo. This particular combination of games would not work on that for some reason. But let's see if it runs on this. Sega! So of course, there you got your Sonic and Knuckles. Now, Sega! There's Knuckles in Sonic 2. So this is... Whoops. It's glitching. That's no good. Sorry about that. I guess that's why you do dry runs. There we go. I guess the cartridge was just dirty. So So this is Sonic and Knuckles plus Sonic 2. If you tried to do this on the Retro Duo, I'm sorry, the the Retro Gen adapter, that's what it's called. On the Retro Gen adapter, this game would not work at all. You'd just get nothing. But here, cheating. Alright, next, let's show off something that's really special. And this is something I haven't done a full review of yet, but that will be forthcoming soon. This is one of my favorite things for the Sega Genesis. This is, of course, the MegaDrive, a device that allows you to play all your Sega Genesis and even some Sega Master System games right on your Sega Genesis. Or Sega Clone in this case. So I can play any game I want, so I don't know, let's throw in something. How about columns? So, we'll play some classic columns. Columns was the Tetris-like game for the Sega. They didn't have Tetris, but they had this. Match 3 of a kind. Get the hints. Alright, so that works, but let's try something a little bit more ambitious. Let's check out one of the most incredible homebrew apps, which is Bad Apple. Bad Apple from Toho Project is a very cool J-pop song that uses shadow art, and this was ported in 2013 to the Sega Genesis and MegaDrive. It's crazy. So check this out. What you're seeing here is rendered on real hardware and uses the Sega Genesis chipset. This is the Sega Genesis doing this. If I had seen this back in the day, my mind would have literally exploded. Full screen video that's running at 30 frames per second with digitized song in the background. Although it should be mentioned that initially when I tried to run this, Bad Apple would not run on the Super Retro Trio the first time I tried it. And after consulting with my good friend Ace9921, I'll put a link to his channel in the video description down below, he showed me that you can simply bridge 2 of the pins with a wire. You can solder them onto the bottom of the board, and that will completely restore Bad Apple and allow the MegaDrive to have full compatibility, just as if it was a real Sega Genesis that you're using. So if you're interested in doing that, I'll include a link to I'll include a photo, a link to the photo where you can see what you need to, where you need to solder a wire to in the video description. So just check that out if you want to do this. Alright, so lastly, there's only one more game that I want to show you guys, and this is pretty mind-blowing that this works. This was actually just kind of by accident I discovered that this would work through this fix that allows you to play Bad Apple on the Super Retro Trio. Man, I love this. Alright, so there's only one thing that can top this, right? And that last thing is... how about the most visually impressive and expensive MegaDrive game ever made? Virtua Racing. When Virtua Racing came out for the Sega Genesis and MegaDrive in 1994, this game retailed for $100. And, you know, if you adjust that for inflation, that's like $130 today, or it might even be more than that. I'll have to look that up later and post an annotation right here to show you guys exactly how much money that is now. Because, anyway, this game was damn expensive back in the day, and the reason it was so much money was because it had a virtual racing processor that was akin to the Super FX chip used in Star Fox and games on the Super Nintendo. However, this was the only Sega game to ever use that 3D chip for the Sega Genesis, as it was eventually deemed too expensive, and, you know, for 3D visuals, the future there was the 32X. You know, laugh at that if you want. So, of course, the 32X version of Virtua Racing is better than this, but this is running, you know, again, on clone hardware, and it's running the original game that runs actually much smoother than what the Super FX chip was capable of. For 3D games have aged somewhat poorly, and, you know, modern day racing games are so much more advanced than what this game is. But for what it is, and looking back, you know, historically, this is crazy. You know, if you compare this to basically any other racer at the time on 16-bit platforms, you know, Nintendo had Stunt Race FX on the Super Nintendo with its Super FX chip, and that game was impressive, but that game ran in a little window, and, you know, it was, you know, kiddie and Nintendo-ish. But this game was, you know, this is a stock car racing game. And, you know, when you move the camera out to this view, you can see how many polygons this thing has to render. And it's pretty crazy, again, because this is running on the Sega Genesis hardware, a system that was never developed to run 3D visuals at all. You know, it couldn't even do sprite scaling the way the Super Nintendo could. Here's the other view, the cockpit view. Well, alright, that'll about do it for this video, so thanks for watching, guys. Make sure that you know, leave a comment down below and tell me what you think about this. I'd also love it if you could, you know, hit the like button, because hitting the like button tells me that you guys love to see these kind of reviews, and I really do enjoy making these kind of videos more than any of my other videos. So also make sure to click the annotations here to check out part 1, which was the overview, or you can click the annotations and check out the subsequent parts. The next part we'll be looking at the Super Nintendo portion, and that's where things start to get really interesting. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time for part 3, so see ya.